We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Friday. It's always good to head into the weekend. Maybe we can relax and lay back a little bit. It was a busy week. It was an interesting week, so we have plenty of things to talk about. But what I like most about this situation is not so much what has already happened, it's what we have to look forward to. And everything we have to look forward to is bad for Donald Trump and bad for the Republicans. Now, I don't usually take a negative outlook on things, but for 6 years we spent with these Trumplafucks and Donald Trump getting away with everything, presumably not accountable for anything. Well, now the chickens are coming home to roost. Donald Trump is going to be accountable, and so are the Trumplafucks, and they're getting nervous. They're reacting crazily. Donald Trump is doing video after video after video on Truth Social. That crazy motherfucker is doing more videos than I do every day, and that's saying something. The only thing about his videos, they don't make any sense. They're just fucking weird and crazy. So I say, good luck, Donnie. You keep flailing, but it isn't going to get you anywhere. You're trapped now. You're in the corner, and they're going to get you. They're going to get the rest of the Trumplafucks and the Republicans that were corrupt and criminal as well. It's now starting to become fun. For the longest time, it was agonizing watching them getting away with things all the time. And now the tide has changed. Now we can sit back and enjoy ourselves. There'll still be things that come along that people will try to bring us down. Like the whole situation. Oh, the Republican legislature in Georgia is going to kick out Fani Willis. Yeah, no, they're not. And we've got a story about that in a little bit that you'll be interested to hear about. We'll start out with some emails. First one starts like this. Mike, this is Jeff, but you can call me Garage Door Jeff. You'll understand the reference. You remember when he wrote an email, was it yesterday or the day before, where he was saying every day he'd go out to his garage, open the garage door, do some exercise, and listen to the Rational Boomer podcast. And I was thinking he was in a suburb, and I thought, that's a little strange. People walking by hearing this voice saying, motherfucker, might be a little disconcerting to some. He goes on to say, I'm 2 years older than you, retired and get up at 4:30 in the morning. I am in a rural setting, so the only other listeners in my new morning routine are deer and my dogs. I have to say this. I know from the ratings, I'm big with deer and dogs, so open it up. Turn up the volume. They love this shit. He goes on to say, and don't let your wife use my exercise to shame you. Assure her that there's plenty else I do that she wouldn't like, so no cherry picking. Oh yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of things she could pick on you about too. The service that you provide me is as follows. I'm one of those that thought mocking the handicap guy was enough. And then over 6 years, literally 20 times have said, okay, this has to be a bridge too far. This is the breaking point. You and me both. And it never was. Even a fucking coup, even a smash up of the Capitol building, an obvious plot to overturn the election and then progress towards justice has seemed so slow. Though now when you see the level of detail, you understand more why. But it's been so hard to shift from frustrated to happy that justice is coming. But you've done that for me. That's the service. And if you think about the difference between those two perspectives over the next 18 months, that's huge. So thanks for that. Best, Jeff. Yeah, we as a country, we as a people are all about immediate gratification. We want it, and we want it now. I've said this before. I think a lot of people honestly believe that the moment Joe Biden was inaugurated, they would handcuff Donald Trump and drag him to jail. Now, that was never going to happen. Justice is slow. And the slower it got and with the media trying to do all they can to confuse and convolute it, a lot of people got frustrated. There's a lot of people in this world that assume the worst. And I think they do that because they know they're going to get the worst, so I just want to be prepared. But that is a bad way to look at things. I'm not saying you have to look at everything positively, because there are some things that are negative. But look at things logically. Think about how things will play out. And that's pretty much what I do. When I hear a story, I don't just listen to the headline, because that's usually clickbait to suck you in, either to make it better or worse than it actually is. So then it's incumbent on us to take a look at the deeper story and see what the truth is. It's unfortunate we have to do that with our news media these days, but I'm telling you, we have to. When they're telling you the sky is falling, chances are it's not. So you got to figure out what the real story is. And that's what I try to do with Rational Boomer, try to figure out the real story. Trust me, if the sky is falling, I'm going to tell you the sky is falling. Get under the bed because the sky is falling. But I've never felt that along this whole process. Actually, it's gotten better for what I was doing throughout the time I've been doing the podcast. It seems to have gotten more positive as more things have come to light, as more proof and as more evidence has come out. What I thought initially was coming to fruition in all of that evidence. It became clearer and it made more sense that there would be justice and there would be accountability for Donald Trump and for the Trumplafucks. And here we are, all those months, years later, and it's looking like it's inevitable. So this is the good news. I want people to think about something. All those people who agonized and was sure that it was going to go badly, because there were a ton of you, maybe not you, but a ton of people that thought, oh, no way this is going to happen. Donald Trump will get off. He'll get elected president. Everything's going his way. We do nothing but lose. Now, I kept trying to tell you, don't take that attitude. You're going to be sorry about it later. And it's all about how you take a look at it. Because now there are people sitting there taking a deep breath and feeling relieved that they were wrong. But what they aren't considering is those months and those years that they agonized over it, that they worried about it unnecessarily. That's a lot of time to waste. That's a lot of pressure to suffer through for no fucking reason. I think it's important that you don't worry about the things you can't control. Try to look at things, rationalize it out, use logic, use common sense, and just watch what happens. You can't agonize over this stuff, otherwise it will kill you. And what we have going on with Donald Trump now, all those people that agonized about it, have a lot of wasted time behind them. I'm sure you're glad now that it's starting to go the other way, but you wasted a lot of time and a lot of emotions worrying about something you didn't need to worry about. And even if there was something to worry about, even if it did come out in the worst possible way, there was really nothing more you could do about it. See, I had to take that attitude when I started doing the Rational Boomer podcast. There were a lot of things I wanted to fix. There were a lot of things that I wanted to do. But I quickly realized I'm just one guy sitting in my living room. I can't fix all these things. I can't do all the things I want to do. So instead of doing all the things or trying to do all the things I can't do, I decided to just do the one thing I can do. And that's hopefully bring out information that might be valuable to folks, that might incite people to pay more attention, to fight back, to push back. What I'm doing here with the Rational Boomer podcast may be a lot, it may be a little, it may be nothing, but at least I'm making the effort. And all of you, by listening to the Rational Boomer podcast or the TikToks and then passing that information along, you're doing everything you can do too. None of us can fix this all by ourselves. It takes kind of a groundswell. And that's kind of what I hope for with the Rational Boomer podcast and the TikToks. And that's kind of what happened. I mean, we're not a huge force out there, but we're significant, and we can start a groundswell. We have started a groundswell. So the point is instead of giving up and saying, oh, we're lost, do something, do anything. Even if what you think is not much, if a lot of people do what little they can do, then it turns into a lot. I mean, I could sit here and talk the way I talk every day for the last 3 years with nobody listening and accomplish nothing more than getting this shit off my chest. But if I get people listening and they start talking, now we're headed in the right direction. I'm not saying that you and I, the Rational Boomer podcast, is going to save the country, but we're helping to push. And that's all we can do. And we should be content with doing that and just hope that everybody else can do a little. We'll do the same. All right. This next one starts out with, hello, Mike. Thank you for keeping me in the loop with the insanity going on in this country. I have a theory why the geriatric community, Mitch, Diane, etc., are hanging out in politics. I worked for a telecom company in the late 90s, and there was a guy, engineer there at the time, that said he told his wife if he passed away anywhere other than at the company that she had to get his body back onto the company grounds, even if it's just in the car park. This way, the benefits would increase, double, I think, pension life insurance. I'm not familiar with if this rule is the same for political folks. If it is, I would have to be, they're looking out for their family members. I don't know. I think that's called double indemnity. The only times I've heard about it is if you have life insurance and you die a normal death, you get paid. But if you die in a tragic or unusual or criminal way, then you get double. I don't know if that's the same with insurances with companies, but it's conceivable. And I'll be honest with you, Mitch McConnell, I don't think he's worrying about money at this point. I think Mitch McConnell and his wife have so much fucking money, they don't need to get another million. They'll be fine. And his wife is elderly too. So and she's working, I think, still. So I don't think it's money. I think it's all about power. And I don't even think it's about Mitch and Diane. You know, if I'm at a stage where I'm on death's door, I'm just going to want people to leave me alone, let me relax. This is about the respective parties, Democrats and Republicans. If these people leave, then that affects their power. So they want to game this as long as they can. Do you really think Mitch and Diane care about that now? I mean, if you're near death, are you really going to still play the game with power and money? None of it makes any difference at this point. Although, you know, based on what we've seen of Mitch, it wouldn't surprise me if he was striving to be the majority leader again, and then we'd have to grab the gavel out of his cold, dry hand. That wouldn't surprise me. But he's not in his right mind now, so he's not thinking about the normal things he's doing. I don't think it has to do anything with money. I think it has more to do with power, and I don't think it's Mitch and Diane. I think it's more the Democrats and the Republicans. All right, on a personal note, she says, also, I don't know if you have attorneys in your audience, but I have a question. Maybe if you know or someone in earshot like you, I own a condo, but the management here is ticking us off. I think they think that this is an assisted living nursing home complex. They're just passing rules and demands out of this world. The latest, they want us to provide them with our homeowners insurance info. They're not satisfied with yes or no that we have or have not insurance. Kind of talking about HOAs. I think a lot of people get pissed off by HOAs. I have an HOA here in Minnesota and one in Georgia. My goal is to stay out of it. I don't want to deal with political bullshit as long as nothing crazy happens. I'll be honest with you, that homeowners insurance info, I think I had to provide mine. And that was the least of my concerns. If they want my homeowner's insurance, I don't care. But the HOAs tend to be a little nosy. And I will tell you this, I don't know that it's the management. If we're talking about an HOA, maybe we're not talking about an HOA where you are, but I'm assuming there is. What you got to do is look at the HOA board. There's a bunch of people who live in the complex here where I'm at, and they're all like 150 years old, and they all make demands and do stupid shit. And I've had people ask me, why don't you be on the board? Because I don't want to fuck with that. I don't want to play those political games. And besides, I don't think they want me on the board because things will change dramatically instead of just doing whatever they're fucking told and having coffee later. That ain't going to happen. I'm going to stick my nose in things and I'm going to say no now and again. But yeah, HOAs have a lot of power and there isn't a lot of recourse. I've looked into things like this before. She goes on to say, I and a few of us think that's our business. As long as our next of kin designated persons are aware of these things, what is it to them? And that's a good point. That's an excellent point. I mean, if anybody is going to be asking you for your homeowner's insurance, it would be your mortgage holder. They want to know their interests are insured. The homeowners association, I'm not sure what it is, but they ask for some stupid shit. They just upped the frequency of the dryer vent cleanings to annually from every 2 years. Our condo are two side by side, and the distance to the outside is like a hand reach. No real chance of clogging up that vent. Anyway, I will continue to keep listening and hope someone out there will respond. Thanks, Mike. Marcy. Well, thank you, Marcy. I understand your frustration. I deal with 2 HOAs. I have I always fight against authority, like John Mellencamp once said. I'm not a big fan of authority, especially when they ask for stupid shit or unnecessary shit. Sometimes when you're talking about HOAs, it's a bunch of people sitting on this board that don't know what to do. So they just come up with stuff. They pull it out of their ass and say, oh, this is a good idea. Let's do that. And then all the other people on the board go, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Now we've got something to do. One of the things I considered doing, and I haven't done it because I really haven't had that much trouble with my HOA. But one of the things I thought, okay, you want to have a committee, a commission, a board for the HOA. What if I got together a bunch of people that are regular owners in the complex and we put together our own little board with a lot more people and a little more clout? Then what are we going to do? Kind of like a union. I mentioned that to a board member one time and she kind of raised her eyebrows and goes, I don't think you can do that. And I told her, I don't think I care whether you think I can do it or not. I know I can do it. I could start a little bridge club with all the people and spend some time talking about some of the stupid bullshit you're doing. And it's funny, they don't talk to me anymore. They're nice to me when they see me. Oh, hi, Mike, how you doing? But they don't want to engage me. And they definitely don't want me on their board. I feel for you, Marcy. There's sometimes a pain to deal with it. Unfortunately, all too often, the people that sit on these boards are the Karens of this world. They're busybodies. They have nothing better to do, so they like to cause rifts or to make other people's lives necessarily. I think it's always important to push back if you can. As an individual, I don't know that you can accomplish much. I don't think any individual can accomplish much. you may want to think about organizing. I do know that HOAs do have a lot more power than you would hope. But if there's a lawyer out there that has some advice for Marcy, please send me an email and help her out. I, w- I will tell you this, Marcy, and I mean this with all decency. The problems you describe, not a big deal compared to some of the shit I've heard. I've heard some horror stories with HOAs. But you're right to question it, because if they start out with little things, it will turn into big things. So I'm not suggesting you don't have a point of contention. You do. And at the very least, you're deserving of some fucking answers to those questions. And a lot of times they don't want to answer it. Well, that's just the way it is. That's what the covenants say. That's what the board says. Well, that's not a good enough answer. Anyway, next up, I've got a couple of notes that Lisa sent. Bloomberg tracks top 500 billionaires in the country. Donald Trump doesn't make the list. It's because he's not a billionaire. James said in her filing that he has inflated his net worth anywhere from 812 million to 2.2 billion every year for 10 years, 2011 to 2012. He may have assets worth $1 billion or so, but liquid assets are very limited. Just confirmed he will not approve a commission to remove Willis. He's talking about Brian Kemp, and we'll talk about that more too. Lisa's a big help. She'll send me tips about news stories and stuff that allow me to dig into it and figure out what the fuck is going on out there. So thank you, Lisa, for that. We'll talk more about those topics she brought up. Now, yesterday, we were expecting sentencing for all of the Proud Boys, you know, the ones that were convicted of seditious conspiracy. And we only got 2 of them sentenced. 2 leaders of the Proud Boys street gang were each sentenced Thursday to more than a decade in prison for their role in the planning and execution of the plot to overturn the 2020 election. First off, Joseph Biggs. Oh, he's a rough and tough patriot. He's an Army veteran and a former correspondent for Alex Jones' InfoWars, so he's got quite a pedigree. He was sentenced to 17 years in prison by the U.S. District Judge Tim Kelly in Washington yesterday. And the prosecution was asking for 33 years. He only got 17 years. That's still quite a bit. He's 39 years old. He'll be much older by the time he gets out. So 17 years for Joe Biggs. And I'll tell you something, this big tough guy that led the attack on the U.S. Capitol, he wanted to say something after he was sentenced. And honestly, it was a little hard to figure out what he was saying because he was crying his fucking eyes out. Mr. Big Tough Patriot was whining and crying after he was sentenced. And again, he became the poster boy for fuck around and find out. Now, there was another person, Zachary Rell, former head of the Philadelphia chapter of the Proud Boys. He was sentenced to 15 years. Biggs and Rell are 2 of 5 Proud Boy leaders convicted in May in the seditious conspiracy case, which served as one of the Justice Department's highest profile indictments against any Capitol rioter. Now, Biggs wore an orange prison jumpsuit and black thick-rimmed glasses as he spoke before Judge Kelly early Thursday afternoon, taking breaks to sob during a brief statement. Yeah, he's not so brave now. He can attack the Capitol when he's being protected by Donald Trump, but when he fucked around and found out and is held accountable and have to go to jail for 17 years, he gets a little weepy. And you know what? Motherfucker deserves it. He deserves it. And I don't feel a bit of empathy for him. This is what he said. in between sobs. My curiosity got the better of me, and I will have to live with that for the rest of my life, he said. I'm so sorry. Now, Judge Kelly responded with a note that the actions taken by Biggs and the Proud Boys upended not just the election process on January 6th, but the election process going forward. He said, what happened that day? It broke our tradition of the peaceful transfer of power, which is the most precious thing we have had as Americans. Notice I say had. We don't have that anymore. Now, the Proud Boy co-defendants, Enrico Tarrio, the head of the Proud Boys, Ethan Nordine, and Dominic Pizzola are all set to be sentenced over the next week in Washington. All of them except Pizzola were found guilty in May of seditious conspiracy. Pizzola was convicted of other things, but not seditious conspiracy. Now, you have to understand that seditious conspiracy is a rare but a very serious charge historically brought against terrorists acting on American soil, which is essentially what it is. Albeit that they are domestic terrorists, they are terrorists nonetheless. Each was found guilty on a range of other federal charges, including obstructing Congress, destruction of government property, and assaulting law enforcement, all some serious crimes. Prosecutors sought 33 years in prison for Biggs, recommended 15 years more than the longest sentence handed down in any January 6th case thus far. Oathkeeper leader and Proud Boys ally Stuart Rhodes was sentenced to 18 years in May. Now, the Justice Department painted Biggs as a tactical planner of the Proud Boys movement in the months leading up to January 6th. So he was one of the head guys. He got 17 years and he deserved every fucking bit about it. And I'm sure he's got his head buried in his shitty pillow on his shitty bed in jail as we speak, weeping, wishing he could do it all over again. But I got to tell you, somebody like this is so fucking stupid. They don't learn anything. They aren't going to change what they do. As I've said before, this is almost like brainwashing. I heard somebody talking about it today, and they said when somebody is brainwashed, it's not like you can flip a switch and all of a sudden they're not brainwashed. It takes some time to get them out of this mindset. This person was saying it could take 5 or 10 years for people to get back to normal. And the only way you can look at it is brainwashing. They are led to believe something that is utterly false, and they are convinced it is true. I don't know what you do with that. I mean, if somebody like you or I goes up to one of these brainwashed fucks and tries to explain the truth, the facts, the law, nothing we say will change anything. Nothing will convince them that they are wrong. Nothing. Trust me, I've fucking tried this and it doesn't work. So you get to the point where you just don't bother. You don't argue with them because there is no fucking point. Now, one of the things that will be a plus in helping these people come to the realization of what is true is the fact that the Georgia case is going to be televised. The arraignments, I believe, are going to be televised. And so that's no doubt going to draw a big crowd of people watching. And no doubt many of Trump fans will be watching as well. They will see the facts. They will see how Donald Trump acts, and they're not going to be able to spin this. And that's why the televising of that trial is so important. And hopefully we can get some converts when that happens. Hopefully they're sharp enough to see the truth and go, fuck, I'm a fool. I fucked up. I'm changing my mindset. I know that sounds like a lot to ask. It may be an impossibility. Maybe all it's going to take is some time for them to come to the realization. Or maybe they just believe this until they die, and we can hope against hope that their descendants are a little smarter than they are, and they get to see the real story. What Donald Trump did to this country is incredibly damaging. What we're hearing about the court cases, that's only just a small part of it. It's the destruction of people's families and friendships and businesses. It's the destruction of the confidence in the government in this country, the sanctity of a peaceful transition. All of those were taken away strictly because Donald Trump has an out of control ego. He doesn't care about anybody. He doesn't care about the country in spite of what he says. He only cares about himself and enriching himself. And by allowing to him run roughshod over this country, he has damaged this country to no end. And that is the fault of the Republicans, all of us, the Democrats, the independents. We've seen this from the beginning. The fact that Donald Trump is corrupt and a criminal isn't new to us. We've known this all along. But the brainwashed, unwashed motherfuckers could not be convinced otherwise. So we've been at loggerheads for a long time, and that's why we've not had a chance to heal. The healing will only come once Donald Trump is taken out of the equation. And when I say that, I mean put in jail and silenced. It's coming. It can't come too soon. And if you're worried about when it's going to come, like I told you before, just be patient, sit back, know it's coming, and be positive about it. Be confident in what we're going to see. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. Now, I know a lot of people have been very worried about this situation with Fani Willis in Georgia, the situation where the Republican legislature passed a bill that would create a panel that could get rid of or fire district attorneys in their minds at will. Now, I think a lot of people believe that the legislature could just do whatever they wanted. That's not true. The panel, it's a bunch of lawyers and judges. It's not likely to react like the legislature, the Republican legislature might. But people were worried about this. They go, oh, just when we got them, they'll kick her out. Again, there's that negative attitude sneaking in there. But I told you all along, it's not going to happen. It can't happen. It's not going to happen. And there are any number of reasons, but there was a reason that came out yesterday that proves my point and almost assures that nothing is going to be done. Because there's one other party they need on board if they want to kick out a DA. That happens to be the governor. And guess what? They don't have the governor on their side, even though the governor is a Republican. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp shot down demands that Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis will be censured or removed from her position, saying Thursday that the process some members of his party are calling for could be unconstitutional. Excuse me. Now, Kemp's remarks at a press conference followed demands from some Georgia Republicans that the state's General Assembly call a special session to punish or fire Willis or defund her office after she oversaw a fourth indictment of President Donald Trump. Now, normally you would need evidence or witnesses, and they have none of that, but they just want revenge. They're not even suggesting that she's doing anything badly. They just don't like the fact that she's doing it against their Lord and Savior. Now, Kemp said the bottom line is that in the state of Georgia, as long as I'm governor, we are going to follow the law and the Constitution, regardless of who it helps or harms politically. And I will give Brian Kemp credit. That's exactly the answer he should give. That should be the standard policy of any state. We know it's not with some other Republican states that are a little less credible, but at least Brian Kemp is sticking to his guns. And I'm not surprised by this because, of course, Brian Kemp was the one that put up the hurdle for Donald Trump when Donald Trump tried to overturn the election in 2020 in Georgia. Brian Kemp's not a Trump fan. He's not a Trump supporter, in spite of the fact that he is a Republican. And because he is more reasonably minded, that's why some people are thinking that Kemp might sneak in the door and end up being the Republican nominee. I still wouldn't vote for him, but he'd be a far better choice than any of the other fucking clowns that were up on that debate stage. He went on to say any action against Willis would need to be done through a panel Kemp established this year called the Prosecuting Attorneys Qualification Commission. Now, keep in mind, Kemp did sign off on this, so he's for it. But I think he understands that, these judges that they're going to kick out or banish or whatever they're going to do are going to have actually committed some crimes or some negligence. And that's just not the case with Fani Willis. You know it, I know it, and thankfully, Governor Brian Kemp knows it. Now, he said, up to this point, I have not seen any evidence that the DA Willis actions or lack thereof warrant any action by the Prosecuting Attorney Oversight Commission, he said. But that will ultimately be the decision that the commission will make. Taking action against Willis through a special session, as Trump's allies have demanded, may ultimately prove to be unconstitutional, Kemp continued. He noted that he'd also oppose calls for a special session at the end of the 2020 year to overturn the state's presidential election results in favor of Trump. See, they tried this before, 2020. Donald Trump lost Georgia, so they wanted a special session for the legislature to overturn the final votes for Georgia. He said, in Georgia, we will not be engaging in political theater that only inflames the emotions of the moment. Now, Georgia House Speaker John Burns, another Republican, made similar remarks in a letter Wednesday after some of his colleagues suggested that they could defund Willis's office, all while Hurricane Idalia was ripping through the state. He said, it's an unfortunate reality of today's politics that theatrics sometimes garner more attention than genuine human needs, like those that will unfold today in South and coastal Georgia. Now, Willis's case against Trump concerns his efforts to overturn the state's 2020 presidential election. Trump, who frequently attacks Willis on social media, surrendered at the Fulton County Jail last Thursday on charges of racketeering, forgery, and other counts. Now, the one thing that Donald Trump did do, we know that the week of September 5th is when the arraignments are going to be going on for the 19 co-defendants, which at one point did include Donald Trump, but Donald Trump made a move today, and he will not be showing up for the arraignment, his arraignment. He had the right to waive the right of an arraignment, which he did yesterday. He said he understood everything about that, and he pled not guilty to all the charges. So come the week of September 5th, Donald Trump will not be showing up for an arraignment. And I tried to think about why that was, what was the reason. Now, part of it could be logistics or security issues. That's, I guess, reasonable. But also, it could be that he's just too busy. All the golf games, the rallies, all the time spent doing videos on True Social. I mean, where does the time go? He doesn't have time to go be arraigned. But I think there's a bigger reason why he does not want to go to the arraignment. Because at the arraignment, that's when the video in the courtroom starts. Donald Trump was embarrassed by the mugshot, now trying to make money off of it, but he was embarrassed nonetheless. But I'm sure he doesn't want video cameras in his face when he's being arraigned. He's not going to have any choice when the trial starts. He will be on TV and his ratings will be awesome. I'm sure he'll like that, except the presentation won't be to his benefit. It will expose him for the corrupt criminal he is. It'll expose him for the coward he is. But I really think if there's no other reason why he didn't want to show up to the arraignment, is he just didn't want to be on television during the arraignment. He has no control in that situation. He just answers some questions and then he leaves. And any look that he has on his face will be examined deeply. Oh, did you see he had a twitch there? Did you see Jack Smith was looking at him and he was too afraid? There's no winning for Donald Trump going in for the arraignment if it's going to be on videotape. And those other factors might be part of it, but I guarantee you he did not want to be on camera any sooner than he had to. And he's got to be shitting his pants knowing that when the trial starts, whenever that might be, Fani Willis says October 23rd. Don't think it'll start that early, but it's going to be sooner than later. And Donald Trump is shitting his pants of having to be tried in a Georgia court on national or worldwide television. Now, talking about Fani Willis, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis is warning all 19 defendants, including Donald Trump in her case alleging racketeering and numerous other charges of election subversion, that invoking Georgia's speedy trial law, but demanding to have their cases tried individually instead of en masse, will bring consequences and deprive them of valuable advantages. And see, that's what's happening. We're getting everybody telling the judge, oh, I want to be separate on this, which is counterproductive to what a RICO case is all about. A RICO case typically involves a lot of people. And now everybody wants their separate court cases. Now, this will make this whole process go on forever, couple, 3 years. No doubt they take Donald Trump first because of the time sensitivity to this whole situation. But I'm really interested to see how they're going to handle this. Now, people have the right to ask for a speedy trial, but that doesn't necessarily mean the other people have to go along with it. So if you don't sever these people from the case, what do? Do you force one or the other to do whatever the majority wants to do, delay it forever or delay it for as long as they can, or do the speedy trial? See, that's what Fani Willis did when she got 2 or 3 people asking for the speedy trial. She said, okay, we'll do it October 23rd and we'll have everybody come in and we'll try the case with everybody. I think that's what she wants to do. She seems anxious to do it. Initially, she suggested a trial date is March of 2024. But since everybody wants to be in a hurry about it, she said, I'll accommodate. I'll do it October 23rd. And I think some of these people thought she wouldn't be ready. I beg to differ. I think Fani Willis was born ready, and she would try them tomorrow morning if given the opportunity. Now, Willis's goal is to have one trial for all 19 defendants in October. Probably not going to happen in October. Attorney Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro have already requested to have their cases severed from the group. Chesebro's trial is now scheduled for October 23rd, and that comes from the publication The Messenger. But The Messenger's senior legal correspondent, Adam Klasfeld, adds, Willis wants to advise all of the defendants in the Trump racketeering case that decisions by Ken Chesebro and Sidney Powell to invoke speedy trial rights come with certain consequences. Love that word, consequences. It's been so long since we heard about that while Donald Trump was president, and now I'm hearing about it every day. Fucking love that. She said those consequences, based on Georgia law, according to a legal filing Klasfeld posted, including 4 constraints on the ability to demand discovery materials and call witnesses. Defendants can not now argue that they are entitled to the state's discovery responses 10 days in advance of the trial. Defendants cannot now argue that they are entitled to notice of the state's similar transactions evidence 10 days in advance of the trial. Defendants are now precluded from calling any witnesses whose statements weren't provided to the state at least 10 days in advance of the trial. Defendants cannot now complain that they receive less than 7 days notice of a trial date in this case. Classfield notes Willis prompts the defendants to choose their path in light of these consequences. Should they refuse to waive their speedy trial demand and request a continuance, then any harm to the defendants would be invited by the defense and therefore not reversible error. Now, over at the Messenger, Classfield writes that Willis's office has asked the judge to issue a ruling requiring that the defendants personally place upon the record that it is their decision and preference to proceed in this fashion prior to the trial of the case. So Fani's basically saying, look, man, you want to do this, cool, but there are going to be some ramifications. Be ready to deal with that. Now, I would be surprised if their lawyers didn't already know that. I mean, I'd be surprised if they weren't Republicans, because apparently Republican lawyers are the fucking dumbest people on the planet, especially if they represent Donald Trump. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see how they react to these comments by Fani Willis. Did these people really want a speedy trial? Well, I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted a speedy trial. These people asking for speedy trials don't have unlimited money. The longer you drag this trial out, the more money it's going to cost, and it's going to probably bankrupt most of these fuckers, or at least put them in a bad situation. So money might be an issue. The other issue, as I've mentioned before, might be to put pressure on Donald Trump. Donald Trump does not want a speedy trial. He wants to delay it as much as he possibly can. These people presumed they were going to get some money from Donald Trump in terms of her legal representation, but they are not. So maybe they look at this as a way to pressure Donald Trump to say, oh, yeah, I'll give you some money. This is a very interesting situation in this case, because I really have no clue how it's going to turn out. Are they going to try them all together? Are they going to sever everybody? And if they sever everybody, isn't that contradictory to a RICO case? This is going to be a tough decision by the judge. I presume it's going to be a tough decision, but a decision the judge will have to make. I don't know when he's going to make that decision, but it can't take too long, especially if we're talking about a trial on October 23rd. That's, what is that? 2 months away, less than 2 months away. That's coming quick. Time goes by quickly as you get older. I found that out. So we'll see what the judge does. We'll see what Fani Willis does, and we'll see what the 19 criminals ultimately decide. The one thing you can count on, Donald Trump won't have anything to do with the other 19 criminals. He's all about saving his own ass, so he'll do whatever he has to do. But Donald Trump may not have the option of doing things differently than everybody else like he normally likes to have. This time he may be stuck with certain things because of whatever the law states. Now, people keep talking about Donald Trump. Oh, he's strong. He's going to be the presidential nominee for the Republican Party. And I've said before, he's got so many legal problems. I don't know how he's going to have time to do that. But even more than that, he's got a problem with money. He is hemorrhaging money. He is bleeding money all over the fucking place. And he's going to need money to continue to pay his legal fees, not to mention trying to run a fucking campaign. And frankly, he's running out of money. Donald Trump's Save America PAC is critically low on funds at the exact moment it stares down the prospect of paying millions more in legal fees for associates of the former president in Georgia election racketeering case. Now, the PAC has spent nearly all of the more than $150 million it raised. Keep in mind, we're still 15 months away from 14 months away from the election, right? He had $150 million in his war chest. You know how much he's sitting on right now? $4 million. That's chump change in that realm. That's not much money. Donald Trump can spend that in one motherfucking day. So clearly he's running through the money quickly and he's not collecting as much money as he'd hoped. Now remember when we were talking about the mugs and the t-shirts and stuff with the mug shot, and everybody was so excited. You made $7 million. It's a lot of money to you and I, but not the way Donald Trump spends money. That's maybe a week's worth of work. He needs to sell a lot more mugs and t-shirts if he wants to keep his head above water. Now, Trump has already dug into his fund for 2024 ads and borrowed money to post bail in Georgia, as some of his co-defendants begged for donations and claim he's not helping them as they assumed he would. 4 of Trump's co-defendants, attorneys John Eastman, Jenna Ellis, DOJ official Jeff Clark, and fake elector Kathleen Latham, have been reduced to using the right-wing Christian crowdfunding site Give, Send, Go for their money. Ellis, in particular, has allegedly been left out in the cold by Trump and his associates because of her work with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former president's most significant rival for 2024. Come on, Jenna. Don't you know any fucking better than this? You know how strongly Donald Trump feels about loyalty. I mean, loyalty from you, but he doesn't express any kind of loyalty. You should know this. You've worked with him for a long time. What do you think he was going to do when he finds out you're working with Ron DeSantis? You're not getting any money now, and you will never get any money from Donald Trump because he's a vengeful piece of shit. Now, these trials could become pretty expensive, according to experts. Defense attorney Danya Perry estimates that if they run for 2 or 3 weeks, they could easily top $10 million. And some of Trump's associates are already facing financial ruin. Rudy Giuliani reportedly nearly broke and already has a default judgment looming over him in an election worker defamation case, as we've talked about before, as well as debts from other legal cases. People will say to me, if he's so broke, why did he come in a private plane when he surrendered? Could have been a friend just cutting him some kind of favor. I think Rudy is probably running out of money. He didn't have the resources that Donald Trump had. I'm not saying Donald Trump was wealthy. I'm just saying Donald Trump had the ability to turn on the money spigot every time he cried to the Trumplafucks. Now, the former prosecutor said at a bare minimum, I can't see most top-level white-collar lawyers doing it for less than $2 or $3 million. As all of this is going on, Trump also needs to ramp up a campaign spending to mount an effective rematch against Joe Biden, who, as of last month, had raised $72 million since formally launching his re-election campaign. Now, that's less than half of what Donald Trump raised. However, Joe doesn't have all the legal fees. He doesn't have the minions he has to pay legal fees for. And he probably has a lot more than $4 million currently in his war chest. Now, the Georgia trial of Donald Trump regarding the election, it has been announced, and we knew this kind of up to this point, but now I think it's official. The trial will be televised and streamed live, according to Fulton County Judge Scott McAfee, the guy who's making the decision. He says this motherfucker will be on TV. Everybody will be able to see it. And as I said, the ratings will be outstanding, but not a positive for Donald Trump. McAfee issued an order Thursday stating that all court proceedings involving Trump and his 18 co-conspirators will be broadcast via a television pool. The Fulton County Court's YouTube channel will stream the trials live. In addition, the judge ruled that reporters will be allowed to have computers and cell phones inside the courtroom as long as they don't record the proceedings. Cameras were allowed inside the Superior Court earlier this month as sealed indictments were handed down by the Fulton County grand jury. McAfee's ruling on transparency is in stark contrast to federal trials that rely on court sketch artists to relay pictures. Apparently, it's not legal to broadcast federal trials. Now, there can be exceptions to this, and there may very well be in the situation with Donald Trump. The information that comes out in these trials is very important to everybody in this country. Somebody may make that case, probably a media outlet, and they may take it to court, and it could go the way of airing the trial in federal court too. We don't know that for sure, but if we have nothing else, we have TV cameras in Fulton County during the trial. And that may be just enough. That may be all we need. Now, only Trump attorneys Kenneth Chesebro and Sidney Powell specifically asked for the speedy trial. But as I said, Willis wrote a document that laid out some ramifications should they do that, and not everybody else comply. Now, MSNBC legal correspondent Glenn Kirshner predicts a chorus of voices from many of the co-defendants saying they will not be able to prepare in time. Kirshner said the prosecutors prefer to try all co-defendants together to prevent an empty chair defense that could lead to a hung jury. And that's why I say it's going to be a really interesting situation. Bonnie wants to do it all together. Everybody wants to be severed out of it and done separately. I don't think that's going to happen. Maybe they'll set up two different trials, one where the people who want to go fast will do one altogether, and then who's ever left over will be in the trial with whoever that is. Now, as I've said before, there's a distinct chance that number 19 will go down a bit, because as these people get closer to a trial date and they're not having enough money, either of their own volition or by way of Donald Trump, they may decide to flip. I mean, somebody like Jenna Ellis, who doesn't have the money, who's already bitching and crying about it, what would stop her from flipping? Especially since she'd been working with Ron DeSantis. Of course she's going to flip. So instead of dicking around and delaying, Jenna, jump on the prosecution train and flip on that piece of shit Donald Trump that's left you out twisting in the wind. Now, one thing we have to talk about is what happened the other day. Mitch McConnell, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, has been medically cleared to resume his duties by the U.S. Capitol attending a physician after his alarming freeze-up at an event in Kentucky this week. This guy has froze up twice in front of the media. He's fallen numerous times. And this physician at the U.S. Capitol said, no, he's good. No, he's good. He can keep working. Is this the same guy that said Donnie Trump was a specimen? No, it's not the same guy, but something seems a little fishy here. I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about medicine, but what I saw of Mitch McConnell tells me there's a serious problem there. And now that it's happened at least twice, there may be times what we haven't seen. There's got to be something going on here. Mitch McConnell does not look good. He seems out of it. And when he freezes up, he seems to be looking into nothingness. Now, Brian Monahan, the attending physician, said he informed McConnell that he is medically cleared to continue with his schedule as planned after consulting with the GOP leader and his neurology team. Occasionally, lightheadedness is not uncommon in concussion recovery and can also be expected as a result of dehydration, Monahan added in a statement released by McConnell's office. Oh, sure, he was just a little lightheaded. I've been lightheaded before. You don't look like that. At a news conference Wednesday, of course, McConnell didn't respond for about 30 seconds after being asked whether he was going to run again. You sit and watch that shit, and it's a little disconcerting. It's a little scary. Now, back when he fell in that hotel, he had some rib problems and he had a concussion. The longtime Kentucky Republican senator is a polio survivor. That's how old that motherfucker is. President Joe Biden said he spoke with McConnell on Thursday. He was his old self on the telephone. It's not at all unusual to have that have the response that sometimes happens to Mitch when you've had a severe concussion. That seems all too easy, doesn't it? Oh, he's got a concussion, so he's going to be lightheaded from time to time. He was more than lightheaded at that point. It didn't look like he was going to faint. He looked like he froze up. And if he froze up like that, acting as if he doesn't know what's going on, is he really that effective as a senator and representing his constituency? I don't think so. And as I said yesterday, it's time that the Democrats and the Republicans cut these elderly folks a break and let them retire, because I do not think it's Mitch McConnell and Dianne Feinstein that are the ones that are saying, no, I must stay. I could be wrong about that, because politicians are a weird breed. But at some point, your party, the people you work with, would hopefully want your best interest in mind and say, you know what, enough's enough. You should just go home and relax, and we'll take care of whatever we have to take care of here in Washington, D.C. Now, the efforts by McConnell's team and his allies to tamp down speculation about the senator's health aren't likely to quell swirling questions about his future as a party leader. Now, several GOP senators are weighing calls for a caucus meeting to discuss their party's leadership once the Senate returns from its August recess next week. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, again, as I mentioned yesterday, even suggested McConnell should step down. Still, one prominent McConnell detractor isn't pushing for his ouster this time. Senator Rick Scott, who led a failed effort to oust McConnell as leader earlier this year, said he didn't see McConnell going anywhere anytime soon. So that means he's going to be leaving soon. I've always said that. I found this out in my life. When you walk into a job and there might be some cutbacks going on in the job, and they call you in and say, Mike, we don't want you to worry because you're not going to get cut. That is the moment you go back to your desk, get a box, and load everything up, because you're definitely getting cut. Now, Scott said, I expect he'll continue to be the Republican leader through his term. We will have another election after the 2024 elections. And that's the point. McConnell's term goes until 2026. We're talking about 3 years that McConnell's going to try to have to hold on. And based on what I've seen in these situations where he's frozen up, that's not going to happen. As I said earlier, I have this feeling that the Republicans and Democrats will demand that they stay in power up until the time they keel over on the Senate floor. Now, you want to talk about a spectacle. And then what do? These politicians are doing what they all seem to do. They love to delay the inevitable so that they can get an advantage or game the system someplace, somehow. Well, you can't stop nature. You can't stop God, if you will. When it's Mitch's time and Dianne Feinstein time, they're going to go. And it doesn't sound like it's that far away. And then these people will have to scramble to save themselves. Why not think ahead? Why not say, yeah, in the next couple of months, let's let these two go. And in those 2 months, we'll figure out how we're going to handle it. It may or may not be exactly the way they want it, but fuck, these are human beings, and they are in their late stages of life, and they aren't in a situation to do the jobs they were elected and paid for. So let's let them go home and rest. Let's be done with it, in spite of what negatively might happen to your party. Humans and people's lives are bigger than any party. The Democrats and Republicans are telling us that's not true. The parties are most important. And therein lies the problem with our politicians these days. It's all about money and power and not about humanity. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. Thank you for spending the time today to listen and watch. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.